I was about 12 years old when we caught the first dolphin I'd ever seen. And I was absolutely on fire from that minute on. And then the first time I caught blue marlin, that was the end of it. I mean, you know how bad that is for all of us, right?
Yeah.
You'll catch that first blue one and you'll spend your life's fortune and you'll do anything you have to catch the next one.
Yeah.
And how did it start out? Like, what was the origin story?
Too much alcohol.
Really? Okay.
Says if God wanted us to have fiberglass boats, he would have given us fiberglass trees.
It's for fishermen. It's not for taking the wife and the wife's friends.
I think that it's a really, really pretty boat.
And then there was a blur that went by and ended up in the cockpit, as far as if I can remember correctly.
Hey, everybody. Anthony Pino from Hook Optics and the 64 Casin Blood Money. I'm by myself today. Carulo is on his way to the DR. I think he's from just left Long Island and going to Turks and Caicos. So he's indisposed, but we have a great guest with us this evening, Randy Ramsey of Jarrett Bay Boatworks. If you don't know who Jarrett Bay is, been under a rock for a long, long time because they've been around for a long, long time. So, Randy Ramsey, welcome and appreciate the time.
Well, thank you, Anthony. I'm really excited to be here, you guys. I've been listening to some of your podcasts. I think you're doing a great job. You know, you're having a little bit of fun while you're doing it, and a nice casual atmosphere. It's enjoyable to listen to. I've certainly been tuning in, and I'm glad you all asked me to be part of it.
Oh, I appreciate it, Randy. And that's awesome that some older guys and some guys that have been around for a long time actually enjoy it. So I was always worried about that when we started that. I don't know why I was worried, but have somebody like you say that I really appreciate it.
No, you're doing a great job, and I'm glad you get a few of us old timers on here too. I mean, you know, let's make sure you talk to us before we're not here anymore.
Yeah. So, I mean, Randy, just tell us a little bit about, you know, how you got started in fishing, and then how the idea of Jarrett Bay Boatworks even started, you know?
Yeah, I'm glad to. You know, it's an interesting ride. And to see where we've come from, where we are today is I even have a hard time getting my own arms around it, and I've lived through it. But you know, you got to go back a long way. You got to go back to when I was a kid. I had an uncle who was a charter boat captain, and he fished out of Murrells Inlet, South Carolina. And I'll never forget fishing with him when I was probably 12 years old. And I said, well, wait a minute. You go fishing and get paid? This you can make a living doing this? I said, this is what I want to do. So, you know, when all the other kids are in the 7th or 8th grade or whatever, you know, you're saying, oh, this wants to be a fireman, this wants to be a lawyer, this wants to be a doctor. They said, what do you want to be, Randy? And I said, I want to be a charter boat captain. And I don't think anybody had ever heard that before outside of maybe Morehead City. And that's really a goal that I set forth and decided I was going to do. So I started logging days and going on other charter boats and going on head boats. And I sat for my license on my 18th birthday and had a charter to run the next day. So 18 years and one day. I was no pressure at all. You know, back then, as a little before it is now, we drove to Wilmington, and the ensign sat across the desk and watched you take your test. And if that wasn't a little unnerving for 18-year-old, I don't know what would be. But I managed to come out there with a piece of paper the same day and ran the charter. And, you know, it's that just goes back for the love of fishing. You know, I loved going fishing with my parents, and we fished in the winters up in the sounds. We fished for, you name it. It didn't make any difference. Speckled trout or sea bass, or it didn't make any difference. Trolling for dolphin, mackerel, it didn't make any. We just wanted to go and get something to pull on the hook, and that just kind of carried forward, you know. And so we started charter boating, and I actually started running my boat out of Harker's Island. You know, everybody said that they didn't think there'd be enough business there, and you couldn't sustain it there. My parents ran a little marina, and you know, things went better, I think, than most people thought they would. And we were running maybe 120 days a year or so out of there, and just filling in, doing other stuff. And that's sort of where it all started, you know, from the charter boat. I ended up charter boating 14 seasons. And the only reason I got out of it is the guy that had been going mate for me for years. He'd been, he's from 83 to 93. We was crew on the boat. He took a job on a boat we built called Real Quick. And I said, man, this guy does all the work. All I do is drive. You know, I got to train somebody else to do this. So by that point, we had about 50 employees, and it was time to go to work. But it all comes back down to the fishing. And I still enjoy doing it, still love doing it. The company was really born out of necessity, honestly. You know, the one thing nobody told me about charter boating is it's really hard to make a living doing that. Maybe it's a little better now, but I doubt it. So I was working other jobs. I was working in a convenience store. I was helping a friend of mine with video games and pool tables, moving them around to different locations and, you know, in the beach communities. And in the winters, I was carrying duck hunting charters and working in the boat shop. A guy named Myron Harris here ran a boat called the Offshore. He and his son Buddy would build a charter boat every year. And well, I guess that's where the boat building started, Myron and Buddy took pity on me, and some kid that didn't know anything about it. And they put together sort of I don't know, almost a group of misfits, a bunch of charter boat guys trying to figure out how to build a boat every year. And that's sort of where the roots of the fishing started. And I'm just going right on, Anthony, but and I'll stop on this in just a minute. But the first boat was, like I say, one of necessity. I mean, we decided that the boat we had was kind of old and decrepit. It wasn't competitive. I had had the opportunity to fish with Omi Tillett up in Oregon Inlet in 1983. And I said, man, this is the darndest thing I ever fished all in my life. And we came home and started trying to figure out how we were going to build one of those boats. Jim Luxton and I put together some ideas and talked to some people that must have been having a really bad day and getting behind us to build it financially. And we started building our first boat in Williston, North Carolina.
Wow.
So that would have been December of 86. We started the first boat.
Gotcha. And that it wasn't your intention to build a boat beyond that at that point, right?
No, absolutely not. I tell people all the time, I'm an accidental boat builder. We just want a good charter boat.
Yeah.
And wanted to have a boat we could compete better on. And we built a boat very similar to the boats Omi had built, real similar bottoms. Omi helped us through the process. Local people helped us through the process. Both Myron Harris and Buddy, Ray Davis, and many others would come down and lend advice and help us figure things out. And, it really was sort of like maybe building barns back in the turn of the century. People from the community came around and tried to help us. And because of that, we were able to get a decent boat out the door that's still fishing charters in Morehead City every day. Wow,
that's incredible. You talk about how Omi Tillett, who's a Outer Banks boat building legend, helped you guys, and I'm fortunate enough to be working on an amazing boat built by Donnie Kaysen down there in Hampstead and Wrightsville Beach, and that was pretty cool because he always talks about how you helped him get started in the industry as well. And I don't know, it's just kind of it's an interesting thing in this community that if you're nice and open-minded, people will just lend you a hand. And I think it's pretty incredible that, if you're not too much of an a-hole, typically people will lend a hand to somebody who may end up being their competitor at one time or another. And it's pretty interesting. And why do you think that is?
I think that comes back a lot to fishermen, right? The one common thread that you can look at from almost everybody in the boat building business, it comes back down to their love of the ocean and love of fishing. How do we make it something better to go in the ocean in? More comfortable or faster. I mean, anybody that think we're all competitive is not paying much attention, because we all want to build the next fastest one. We all want to build the biggest one. We all want that next opportunity, and then we all want to strive for perfection. 1986 perfection for us was a boat that actually had shiny paint on it instead of flat paint. That was a big step. We built that boat here in our community, the first boat ever built with shiny paint. And one of the very first ones built with epoxy. I mean, when you think back about that now, you say, that's insane. Well, how did you even build boat? I'll tell you a quick story. I got to know Captain Omi just a little bit, and I think the world of him. And of course, the podcast folks can't see it, but if you look behind me, that's a picture of Omi and I on my desk. So he and I, we sort of struck up a friendship, a kindred relationship. But then Omi had stopped building boats. And when Jim and I decided we wanted to build the first boat, we wanted some advice. We didn't know what the heck to build. So we drove up to Wanchese and went to the fishing center. They told us he was out mackerel fishing that day. So it's dark. The sportsman back's in his slip. He's the only guy there, he and his crew, and nobody else around the whole place. And Omi left his motor running the whole time. And I couldn't quite figure it out. And then when he finally gets off the boat, he's trying to get away from us. I said, Captain Omi, it's Randy. He said, he come over and give me a big hug. He says, daggone, son, I didn't even recognize you, and I left the motor running. I thought you were just another charter wanted to aggravate me. So you start building on a relationship that the first time when he sees you, he hugs you. Difference. And I think that, while we all have a common thread, and while I talk to Florida builders regularly and we talk about what we're doing or where we're sourcing things, a lot of what happened here in North Carolina can go straight back to Omi, because he never met a stranger. He never wouldn't help. I mean, whatever was helping you rebuild a motor, we all heard those stories. Rebuild a motor, rebuild a head, video for you. I mean, never said no. And I think that love he had for everybody really is carried through. But while I talk a lot about Omi, it wasn't just him. It was Buddy Kennedy came down and helped us set battens up on a boat one time. And Irvin Forbes, who was building boats. He's still building small boats then. Irvin was building in downtown Manio at Warren O'Neill's shop. Welcome us right in the door. Take all the pictures you want. Let me show you how we're doing things. So you mentioned Donnie. When Donnie decided he was going to start building boats, how am I going to tell somebody no?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody I ever asked a question gave me a straight answer and helped me figure it out. And this is somebody that had probably less knowledge a lot less than Donnie had when he started. I mean, he was actually had some skill. I don't know if I had any skill or not, but so I'm proud of that. I'm proud we helped Donnie. I'm proud we helped some other builders get started, and maybe we've helped shape keeping that tradition alive for people to help one another.
I feel like I feel like it's something that is still to this day. I think people are typically pretty generous and with their time and information and knowledge. And I think it's pretty cool. And you don't see it very often outside of our little community. Maybe it's just because our little community that you can go anywhere in the world and run into somebody that, you have the same, like you said, the same passion for the ocean and fishing. And it's kind of after that, you kind of already seem like you know the person.
Right.
So.
And you know how it is, you talk beside somebody. It's not much different if somebody needs a part or something we're all gladly help one another. It's just maybe it's a little different. We built on that boat and couldn't figure out how to put the transom in it. I was pretty glad that Ray Davis and Myron Harris came down and showed us how to put a transom in, because we had no idea.
Yeah. That's incredible. Like, did you just like draw the plans on a piece of paper on the wall or something like that?
Oh, no, it gets better. You don't get on this road, you're not going to have much of a podcast beyond the first boat.
Yeah.
So we went and saw Omi. I said, Omi, how do we start? I mean, I knew I didn't want to build what was being built locally. And I don't mean that ugly at all, but I'd experienced that. I'd been on those boats, and I've been on the boats that Omi changed the world with, really. He would not say it was just him. He would say a lot of different people. He always gave Rick Scarborough a lot of credit, and Rick deserved it. And he gave it to BC and particularly Warren. I mean, Warren O'Neill, the gentleman of boat builders around in North Carolina. But we said, where do you start? What do we do? He said, well, there's been a guy that's helped me when I was building boats. His name is Glenn Haught. We all call him Peanut. He said, now he works for Tom Daughtry over at Sportsman Boat Works. And as you may know, when Omi quit, he sold his company to somebody working for him named Tom Daughtry. And Tom was building absolutely beautiful boats. So I show up over and it's the facility where Paul's got his place, his primary facility on Roanoke Island now. And I went with Wanchis, actually. So I went over there, and I was so in awe by what I saw. I'm not sure I did a very good job of telling Peanut what we were trying to do. He was finishing a boat called the Pescador. And I never dreamed we could build anything like that. I mean, it wasn't even on the radar. I mean, I knew that the Roboviches were building boats in that category, and I knew that Roy Merritt was building boats in that category, but I didn't have any idea that it was something being built in North Carolina like that. So anyway, we go meet Peanut, and we tell him who we are and what we're doing. Omi had sent us. He said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll put a set of offsets, or I'll do a half width drawing basically on a piece of paper for it. I'm going to charge you $400. And I said, well, I want a boat that rides like fork. And he said, you don't want that bottom, you want the temptation. Temptation's better. I said, okay. So we go back up there a couple of weeks later, carry $400, and he's got one sheet of architect's paper, about 4.5 foot long, and he's got a half of a boat drawn there, and with all the framing stations and so forth. And you can take that, interpret that out, and get your offsets from it, and cut your frames. But I said, wait a minute, we can't leave yet. Where's the front of the cabin go? And I remember him in a really agitated sense, taking a rule and saying, about right there. Basically, get out of here. And Peanut ended up being somebody helping us for a number of years, up through about the 23rd or 4th boat. And wow. He was a terrific guy to have on the team, and an artist about as talented and knowledgeable architect as I've ever met, self-taught, and he's passed away not long ago. So I'm glad to get a chance to think about him for a minute.
It's pretty cool. You mentioned self-taught. I mean, I feel like I don't know a whole lot about the lineage of Carolina boat builders, but a lot of them don't start walking out of some boat building school or some naval architecture school. It's amazing that I mean the level of, I don't know, it seems like it's always just trial and it works. I'm sure it doesn't, because you never hear about that, but man, it's a pretty you see some of these boats that were built in Roanoke Island and Harker's Island and places like that that just come out of a shed, even up here in Delmarva, the FNS guys, they built their first boat in a chicken house. And, it's like, how does that come out of there? It's really amazing. And I guess like you said, your original boat was built out of necessity, and I guess it kind of comes out of a necessity almost, especially in North Carolina where you are charter boating quite a bit, that you just kind of gotta just kind of pony up and do it.
Well, yeah, that is where a lot of where it came from, but you got to think about too how many commercial fishermen are in the Carolinas. And that level of commercial fishing, put Harker's Island on the map, about the time internal combustion engines started being used. It was a talented group of people that were able to build some really cool boats for really good purposes then. Look at the old round stern boats and think about how adaptive they were for net fishing and how well they did getting through the ocean. And then you think about even today's Carolina boat, even though there's been some changes, obviously. I mean, a pretty sharp forefoot that goes down through the engine room, flattening out aft to help the boat ride better and get on plane more quickly and be more efficient. I mean, a lot of those principles go right back to the same place. And I think that maybe the most interesting thing to me is I think you can trace them back to the boat that for modern day North Carolina sport fishing boat, you can trace them back to Warren O'Neill's Sportsman, the one he built for Omi. Because Omi and Warren found out there was a Rabovich in Norfolk, and they rode up there and measured that Rabovich and came back down and tried to copy it. And since then, the exaggerated flare that we saw, especially what we were doing back in the 90s. Yeah. And I mean, it got a little out of hand. I'll admit that. I really liked it. It did get out of hand. But all those boats, you can kind of trace back to what John Rabovich was doing. Yeah. And I remember Omi talking about he and Warren, going to see Johnny. And I'm going, Johnny? Yeah, Johnny Rabovich. And he helped them figure some stuff out. So when you can trace it back that far, and when you can see where those roots came from, I mean, it's remarkable to think about today's North Carolina built sport fishing boat and where it really came from.
Yeah.
I mean, and you talk about, we all made mistakes. I mean, Omi was never happy with that boat because the bulkheads laid forward in it. In other words, they weren't straight up and down and didn't lay aft, which is what, we want to be straight or lay aft. It laid a little bit forward, which indicates the boat laid more head down than he wanted to. Mm-hmm. So I don't know who ever told that story to other than me and the old timers that may be gone, but he was determined that would never happen again with a boat he built. As far as I know, it never did.
That's pretty incredible. I don't even know where to go after that. That's kind of getting me just trying to get caught up there. Well, let's talk about how the boats have progressed over the years. Originally you were still up until, I don't know, not terribly long ago, you built your boats plank on frame, right?
Yeah, we actually built the 10th boat we built and the 12th boat we built were cold molded boats. Okay. So we went back into the 10th boat and the 12th boat were actually built. We're still in Williston. So it was around 1990. But they were fairly small cold molded boats. The last big cold molded boat we built was number 20, and that was the Salty Fair. It's up in Wanchese now. I think it's called Wasabi. I
saw it yesterday.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's fighting a big blue marlin.
Cool, those guys have done good with that thing. Yeah. But from there we moved to all cold molded, and it really was. And again, this is going to be my opinion because I don't think everybody agrees with me.
Before you go down this road, can you explain the difference between the plank on frame style and the cold molded for people that aren't super into
So anybody that's trying to keep up, you think about old timey shipwrecks, and you think about the ribs sticking out of the sand, or you think about the ribs. That's basically a plank on frame boat. So what you do is you set it up on a keel, and you've got ribs that come out from there. You got what we call them fore frames and inside frames, but then you end up using another type of wooden material to plank over it. Most typically you used white cedar, which most people here call juniper. Then those boats started getting glassed, and it started getting glassed inside and out. In a cold molded boat, if you think about, almost everybody can think about a jello mold, right, or a cake mold. Well, that's a female mold, and what we're doing is we're building jig boats or cold molded boats on a male frame. So the frame's set up, and we actually plank over the top of it, and then we take the mold out of it so we can remove it. So somebody would say, well, why wouldn't you build female molds like fiberglass manufacturer? Well, building the boats the way we do allows us to have a very low cost in a mold that we can change very, very easily. So if you show up tomorrow and say, we want a 60 and a half footer, we're not constrained by what our mold size are. We can build whatever size you want. The boat's loaded completely different. And when we moved to cold molded, we really were I felt pushed that way because of engine horsepower and the horsepower that's becoming available. When I built those first boats, 750 horsepower was a lot of horsepower. And that was the most we could get. And then all of a sudden now we've got 1,000 available to us. Then you got 1,350 available to us. Then you got 1,500. And then they want to put 1,500. And I had great concern, along with a lot of other people in the industry, that a frame boat just couldn't hold up.
Yeah.
The cold molded boat actually loads down the entire length of the boat. So the boat is constantly moving a little bit, which the first time I rode on one, I was pretty unnerved by that too. When I went in the engine room and saw the engines moving a little bit.
Yeah.
But in the end, it's a better method. It allows us to build a stronger boat. It's safer for the customers, and it makes us all feel better about going faster.
Yeah, which we all love to go faster.
Yeah, everybody wants to go fast. Nobody ever said I want to go slower.
Yeah. So, do you still build the hulls out of plywood and fiberglass, or are you guys composite? I got you.
We do. I mean, I tell you, we build a lot of parts out of composites.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go out in the shop now, you'll see foredecks that are being built out of carbon fiber, cabins that are being built out of closed cell foam, and in some cases carbon. All that's about weight savings, obviously. We're building almost all the components on the exterior, where there's mezzanines or lids or whatever. We're building all of that out of composites. And most of the interior is composite. What we found out when we did a study, we built a boat called Haruko a few years ago. And she was a 90-footer that we had a lot of leeway with. We were able to hire some outside architects. We had a material engineer, we had a propulsion engineer, we had 2 engineers on staff here, and then we had kind of a roving guy that was coming in and out and helping with the design aspects of it. And what we found out was that if we built an all carbon hull or an all foam hull, either one, that in order to meet the same level of noise suppression that we were getting from the wooden hull, we would have just as much weight in noise suppressing fabrics and materials. So even with that boat, which had carbon fiber stringers, never been done before or since, and carbon fiber fuel tanks and titanium shafts, we still built a wooden hull.
Yeah.
And I know that some of the guys that are building boats now don't do that. Roy's building closed cell boats in a mold, and it's working really well for him. Paul Spencer, I should say, is building closed cell foam boats with his hulls. And I totally respect what they're doing. And I think it's a terrific way of building a boat. I got no problem with that. I think our method's better.
I feel like there's still a lot of really reputable boat builders that are pushing the industry in performance and fit and finish and everything like that. Just like you, like that still will not get off that wooden hull. And I mean, we have a wonderful wooden hull boat that I'm thankful to run with a composite topside, and I can't argue with it. I really think it's and it's cool because like, going back the lineage of as boats progress, it's kind of like still pays respect to the people who started it in the first place, that they were still doing something so great, and it's still, even 50, 60 years later, it's still super, still the way to go when it comes to that section of the boat, which is the boat pretty much. So I think it's cool.
It's kind of crazy to look back on, right? We're not doing anything different really than they did when they built PT boats. So if you want to really jump back, the hulls of our boats, although different materials, different glues, different wood, different glass, it really goes back to the 40s. So, what's that, 75 years almost. And we're still doing something pretty similar. Pretty
cool. I think it, from over the years, you still see, the sport fish boats have generally, they've had an evolution of the way they look, but at the end of the day, you can still look at a sport fish boat and know it's a sport fish boat, whether it was built your first boat or your last boat.
Mm-hmm.
You can say that's definitely a sport fish boat because of the way that the way the house is in the back, third of the boat and
Mm-hmm.
everything like that. It's pretty cool that all the crazy things that people were doing, there's still a lot of it that is so similar.
I agree with you. I think it's neat how we borrow from each other.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I use that term as a direct utility term. We just borrow good ideas. I always thought Ricky Scarborough Sr., where he brought his shear to the stem, was he did the very best job of anybody in the industry. And I wanted to make that same look, and I never achieved. I mean, he had something there that was better than the rest of us. And when I look at when I first talked to Renard about the first mezzanine they built, I said, "Oh man, nobody will ever want one of those things." Well, we've all borrowed that now, and you wouldn't build a boat without one. And then really Paul brought to the forefront, sort of changing the houses and put some curvature in the side of the house. And man, I remember saying, "I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to do that." Never say never, because now we borrowed that. And maybe somewhere along the line somebody borrowed something from us, but I do like the way that we all seem to try to take the very best of what someone has figured out and incorporate it in our boats. And the fun part of that is what we were talking about earlier. If I called up any one of these guys, I know they'd say, "Oh yeah, we sourced this from this person. This is how we do it. And if you want to come down to the shop, we'll show you."
Amazing. Did that when they started, when Paul started to sleek out the boats and go that direction with it, how long did it take for that to grow on you? Paul Mann doesn't build boats anymore, but all up until the last ones, they were still probably the most classic ones of the last couple years. The Grand Slam still has a little bit more, I guess it would be boxy, classic look to it, even though it's painted like it's from outer space.
Right.
So, but how long did it take for that newer look to grow on you? Because
I like to say longer than it did, but I'd say within about 4 years, we were starting to make subtle changes.
Yeah.
Our holes they've changed over the years. They absolutely have changed. Talking about the earliest boat didn't have much flare. The boats in the 90s had so much that they were blunt. When you look at them from the bridge.
Yeah.
Well, now we sort of toned all that back a little bit. Now we're probably paying more attention to interior volume and how we accommodate the things that our customers want today. But it wasn't very many years, and we started making several changes with our cabin and several changes with the way our bridge looked. And we have. Paul's got a very distinct look, and frankly, I like it. There's one of his boats hauled up in the boatyard right now that's having some engine work done by Gregory Poole. And man, I like it. I walk out every day and I say, wonder why I hadn't done that yet. But we have tried to stay true to what we've done. And I think you can take that, like I said, from anybody. I think everybody in the business, whether it's and Warren going to look at that Rabovich boat, or whether it's us making some changes to our cabin, to make it a little sleeker. It's we've all kind of taken a little piece from each other.
Yeah. Let's go through some of your boats, and I don't know how, I was a little kid and I would look at your boats in Marlin magazine, but I can't remember, the ones in the 90s and the early 2000s as well as I can remember some of the more iconic ones of the last decade or so. But can you take us through a couple of your favorites in, the 90s, 2000s, and then I'll kind of the ones later in the year, I'll kind of pick a couple out.
Well, there's a couple of them that really stand out. When I think about back in those days, and one of them's got to be the Salty Fair. We built a boat for Salty Fair for Watson Cabinets, who's gone on to do really great things with a couple of different boats. And he and his family and his dad, who actually built a boat for he and his dad. And it was the last frame boat. So it sort of sticks out in my mind. But, right out the gate, she got out 2 or 3 tournaments and started turning a lot of heads. And I always had a real affection for her. You said yesterday you saw the crew fighting the Blue Marlin on it. But that kind of makes me smile, right? We all want our boats to catch well and do well. The one that probably changed things was before her. We'd seen some subtle evolution in the way our boats were. We'd seen some subtle changes in the way they were. But we built hull number 13 for a guy named Carol Thomas. And that boat's name was Real Quick. And she is in Hatteras right now. And she runs charters called Carolina Girl, I believe. But that boat just had the right look. She launched in October '93. She had the right look. She had great performance. First boat we built that had capability to go to Bermuda on her own tankage. She went to Mexico every year, which now is really commonplace today. Not so much in the early '90s. And that boat went around and did some really neat stuff. He was good. He was a great customer. I fished with a boat with him a whole lot. In fact, he's got a 77-footer we built right now that he's fishing on. But that boat sort of helped propel us ahead a bit and helped us sell a few boats. Probably the first boat we built that was cold molded. The first big boat, 58-footer, and we built it as a charter boat here in Morehead City called the Calcutta. It ran a season, and within a season, the boat had been bought, renamed, repowered, an interior put into it, and that boat's sailed under a lot of different names, and now she's shown back up here in a town called Full Circle, which I think is very appropriate that she's come back from a lot of different places. But all those boats mean a lot to me. You think about the Sea Striker, which Adrian Holler's had now for almost 2 decades. And it's hard to argue with the success he's had with the boat. Most recently winning the Bermuda Triple Crown on the boat. So some of those older ones were fun, but it's interesting when you look at them today and you look at what we're building today. I mean, I just shake my head. I mean, the arms race showed up and we all decided we were going to make sure we had everything available. I mean, first time somebody said something about putting an Eskimo ice maker in the boat, I said, what in the world? There's ice machines on every dock. And now, right, if the Eskimo goes out, we all have a heart attack and you're all trying to figure out, oh my gosh, I got to get somebody to work on the Eskimo.
Come on, Randy. They put 2 or 3 in your boats nowadays.
Well, most of them got 2. You're right. You're exactly right. But it's just been a change in the way things are, and I think that's good. Change is good.
Yeah, the evolution is incredible. I mean, when you guys built that grander, the walk around boat with the gray painted with the gray, which I love. I have a 24 Pathfinder painted. My brother has a Maverick and I have a Pathfinder, and we painted both of our boats to mimic that. We actually used the same paint actually. I just think that thing was so cool to have that cool paint job and the walk around. And I mean, tell us that was in, what do you, when you get an order to build a boat that's maybe a little less traditional, I mean, obviously you're pretty open-minded about it because you've taken on some of those projects over the years, but how does that go? Does the person, it's easy when somebody that, maybe had a different boat comes and approaches you, or maybe bought a boat used that wasn't your boat and then comes to you and says, hey, I want to build a traditional sport fisher boat. When somebody comes to you, say like a Grander or even a boat that is painted orange, like the Marlin Fever, it's like, like how do you as a custom boat builder, take that in and approach it?
I think you can take it a couple different ways, right? I mean, I know some of the folks in the industry don't want to do different stuff. I mean, I totally understand that. You get in something you like, and you're not taking quite as big a risk to do it. But when we built the Grander, I met that customer when I was fishing in St. Thomas, and he came aboard a boat we just finished, and he said, "Man, I got a really cool idea, and I'd like to try to do something." Before I know it, he's here in the shop, and we're talking about it and drawing it. And I'm going, this could be really cool. So you try to find, for us, I think it keeps us sharp, right? When we're not building the same thing every day and we're having to actually think about it. And I don't mean to downplay that. There's never been 2 the same, where it's a traditional sport fish boat or where it's a 90 footer or a 48 footer. But the idea to think about starting from scratch, and maybe the best example of that we've done anytime recently is a boat we built called Privateer.
Yeah.
I mean, if you told me 20 years ago we built a boat that had an integrated swim platform, I'd tell you right, you're mine. But she does. I mean, we took a lot of hints from what Michael Rabovich had done on a couple of boats, and I thought what he had done with a couple of them was really cool. When I met that customer, he'd come aboard our boat, a boat we had at Lauderdale Boat Show. He'd walk down the dock. He's looking back at the boat, and I walked down and I said, "Hey, Bob, you can come back if you want to." He said, "I got an idea. Would you be interested in doing this?" I said, "Oh, hell yeah, man. Let's give it a try."
Yeah.
But it came out really cool.
I think it's beautiful. I think it's
got a lot of natural light inside, which is what he wanted. He uses it as an office as much as anything else. It's awesome. I mean, it's just what he wanted.
Yeah.
And if you can accomplish that, you really.
And at the end of the day, you're building custom boats, and the idea for custom people, and you're there to do what, as much as I'm sure some of the requests are, maybe not for the boat itself, but some things they do in the boat might pain you. If that's what the customer wants, then you got to deliver it if that's what you go with.
Yeah, well, we're all going to draw a line somewhere.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah.
I like to think for us, it's all about safety or potential resale for the boat or hurting us reputationally.
Yeah.
I mean, it's important for us to make sure that the other boats are, you don't think about that, but every boat we deliver somehow affects everyone that's ever been delivered before that, and everyone that will be delivered after that. And I just, I've resisted building molds for stuff, and I resisted doing stuff because I like to do it. It's fun to be different every time. It's fun to be challenged. We're drawing our next boat right now, which is a 90 footer, and they've got one of our boats, and they want to draw a lot of the features from another boat. I think that's great. They know exactly what works well for them. They know what they like, and they've been great customers ever since we launched the boat.
How many? So that's you're drawing a new boat. Do you have another monster in the shop now too?
No, just launched a 55, which again
Okay.
was another very different boat. I'm sure as much as you were looking at boats around, you probably saw it named Renegade.
Yeah.
She is a no back in the cabin, stand up, steer from down below, or go
Yeah.
go to fly bridge. And the real challenging thing is that guy's about 6'6". So to try to make the boat work for him and work for us, it was a challenge. It was fun. We already started another boat for him.
Wow.
A 68 footer. And so we've got a 68 and a 64 going right now and getting ready to start a 90.
Okay, gotcha. And what was his reasoning? If you could, you don't have to elaborate because obviously, the relationship between a boat builder and a customers can be private. But if I can ask, what was the reasoning for having the downstairs station?
Yeah, it just evolved. So the boat originally wasn't have a bridge. He had seen some hardtop express boats we'd done, and that's kind of what he wanted to start with. And he and his son were going to run it, and they wanted to have an open back cabin and still be able to be part of the fishing. Sort of an adaptation of the hardtop express boats we've been doing. And then through the project, the boat grew a fly bridge and grew a tower and became more traditional. And now it's got a full-time crew.
Wow.
But it's interesting how things evolve. I think the boat's really terrific. I mean, it's beautiful finished work. They love it. But like I say, he's already started another boat with us.
Yeah, that the way they had their rod storage set up, I think was really cool.
It came out nice, didn't it?
Yeah, I really like. And then obviously, let's just the Haruko, which is basically a spaceship. Let's talk about that boat for a little bit, because I mean it's 90 feet long. I think for me personally, for a 90 footer, I don't know what's so hard between a mid 60s foot boat and a 90 footer to get the proportions right. But that's one of the ones that have really everything is, in my opinion, is really proportionally all like you would. It's just basically a 90 foot 60 footer. But
yeah, I mean, it's like you blew up a 60 footer, right?
Yeah, but there's other, there's a lot of boats that, a lot of those monsterish boats that aren't quite like that, and I don't know why that is. Maybe because you just don't need that much of a cockpit when the boats are so big. It may look small, but it's still a giant cockpit because the boat's so big. But tell us about, I mean, going from your first boat to that boat, that's a crazy evolution.
It is a crazy. I mean, going from the first boat to that boat, we're probably spending more a month on engineers than the first boat cost. It was a great project. I mean, we probably learned more from that boat than any boat. Well, no, we learned a lot from the first one. but we learned a lot. I mean, we learned a lot because the customer he is. He is incredibly bright. He is very driven, and he wanted us to do everything we could to deliver the very best product we could find a way to deliver. He had really good thoughts in his mind as to where he wanted to go with the boat, how he wanted it to look. We chased a lot of stuff, trying to figure out how to make that next step in speed while trying to keep the boat very comfortable. We knew how much he's going to travel with it. And I mean, in a 90-foot boat, one of the things you learn is 10,000 pounds is one knot. So,
wow.
So you start trying to figure those things out. And you start trying to think about how much you can save and everywhere you can save it. And he let us go to the nth degree. Some of the things I doubt we'll ever do again. But I mean, when I talk about carbon fiber stringers, you're talking about something that probably costs 30 or 40 times what normal stringers would.
Wow. When
you start talking about titanium shafts, you're talking about $250,000 to $300,000 for shafts versus say 50 or 60,000. And not a lot of people are willing to pay that amount of money. But he was driven enough, and he wanted to try to find that speed. They allowed us a lot of leeway and allowed us to learn a heck of a lot about it. I mean, that boat's got V drives. Very few boats that you go on today have got V drive. It was all about flattening out that shaft angle. But if you hadn't had a 90 footer, you probably couldn't have made it work as well.
Because you were limited. You guys picked the 16 V2000 MTUs, right, which is kind of the only game in town when you get up to that speed. So you had to make the boat lighter and more efficient to go faster, correct? In order to meet his speed goals, we had to drive weight down because we couldn't drive horsepower up. Dominic Lacombe built a boat called C'est La Vie, which has got the 4000 series MTUs in it, which are considerably more horsepower, but they're also considerably heavier, considerably larger. So we felt constrained by this. I mean, we thought about all kinds of things. I mean, in that process, that boat one time was going to have 4 engines, and we're trying to figure out how to drive 4 engines through 2 shafts, right? I mean, that would have been a long way down the road with that, and we were talking to people in Europe about building transmissions that could handle, the 2 engines driving into it, 2 inputs, 1 output. So when you've got a customer that is
that open-minded, and that well, I'll say it, the guy's brilliant. You know, it gives you, it's going to make you better. You can't help but get better.
Yeah.
And I really liked the boat. I mean, I remember fishing the White Marlin Open on the first year, and I was standing in the galley looking out the window as we passed.
Me,
30.
I remember it.
Yeah.
You guys, I'll never forget it, Randy. We just got this casing boat, which is a 34, 35 knot boat, and we were fishing it, and I seen the AIS. You guys were offshore. I believe you caught 6 or 7 white marlins that day to our 3 or 4 or something like that. And you guys were offshore of us, and I saw that thing, and we're scooting, and I'm probably, it's sort of White Marlin Open, so I had her turned up a little bit quicker than I typically, and we're rolling, right? And I see this thing, I'm looking, I go, I see this is Haruko. He's back there on the horizon. It wasn't a half hour later, and you guys are steaming by us. I was like, oh my goodness. Like, like to think like, oh, we just got this incredible new boat. And then just to see that thing streaking by us. It was you guys, and then the Billfisher, the old Billfisher came by us at a time. And I was, oh my goodness, that thing.
Oh, Johnny was just trying to catch us.
Yeah. I mean, that thing was, it's just amazing what was accomplished there, and how it can fish like a much smaller boat when it actually comes down to fishing.
It really does. When you're fishing on that boat, you would never know it's 90 feet. When the boat handle's terrific. And I think some of that's got to do with the weight. I mean, I remember when I first started building boats, everybody would say, oh, your boats are too light. Mm-hmm. We're all charter boat. We want to get there a little bit faster. And what is it? Mass times velocity. Velocity equals impact. Mm-hmm. So maybe light boats don't ride quite as bad.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I get. But when you're 90 feet, you have that sort of leeway, right? Because you have a certain amount of weight that the boat's going to weigh no matter what.
Yeah, it was a fun project. It was a fun project. I hope we get an opportunity to do something like that again.
Yeah, I feel like there's probably other boat builders and other boat boat owners that took that boat and really looked at it and took some things from it that they're really trying to push themselves, which I feel like if you're not pushing yourself, you're probably getting past. So,
Well, I think that's the way it is in any industry. What you guys are doing here with network and all that. If you're not trying to find something a little different, the edge, some reason somebody wants to listen to your podcast or, follow you or buy merchandise, then, it's going to be easy to get left behind.
Yeah.
I think you're exactly right. Same thing in the boat building business.
Yeah, but you're in the boat building industry, you literally are left behind because you can watch those things take off over the horizon. Or
fair enough.
Yeah. So it's amazing, Randy, the evolution, and I'd only been there a handful of times there in the Jarrett Bay. I guess you'd call it almost an industrial park, but how big is that area?
It's 175 acres here. There's about 100 acres that's been developed. We operate in 150,000 square foot of buildings, which gives us a lot of capacity, and 4 travel lifts, got a 300, a 200, and 275s. And we do about 1,000 service jobs a year.
Yeah. I mean, we got a boat up here called the Real Joy that spent quite a bit of time boats up here, up here. The Real.
I might know her. There might be a 112 Westport around here I've seen by that name.
Yeah.
Or similar name. How about that?
Yeah. Captain Andy and those guys spent a lot of time down there, awesome. And they're always super happy with how it goes. And you've had all their boats there multiple times. So it's pretty.
Yeah, the True Joy's here right now.
Yeah, gotcha. Mr. Daniel.
Yes, sir.
Big smile guy. Can never get in bed. But yeah, it's just did you ever see it? I mean, obviously, what keeps you going? Like when you're, you started as your own charter boat captain. Does it come from building your own boat to what it's grown into? You do a lot for the people around there in the community, just providing that sort of infrastructure, I guess, for the boating community and the local community. I mean, what is there anything that really do you think about it long term, or you just kind of go in every day and give it your all? And
no, I think it's all about that, right? You always got to look to the future and try to figure out, where does this company 30 years from now or 40 years from now when I'm not. And I also think that the ability to try to find people that work here that end up being management, end up being the people that are running the show, and trying to have confidence and have patience while some of that happens. It's that drives me. It drives me to help other people find their success. And I think that I do a lot in the the community, for the university system, and for Big Rock here, and we do a lot for charity. And I think I've been in my life very richly blessed. I've been blessed by the opportunity to know some of these old timers, and heck, man, a charter boat captain without a clue how to put a transom in, ended up building a place here that's operating on 150,000 square foot of buildings and a couple hundred people. It's been a very cool ride, and I think it's just important for us to make sure we're giving back. It ain't no different. And when I really was taken back the other day, I saw somebody post on social media they taught some kid how to rig a squid. It makes me wonder how many people rig a squid. I mean, we were doing that in the 80s and 90s. That was the cool way. You had not to rig a squid, but now not many people know how to do it. So I think it's important we continue to give back and show folks how we did things, even though sometimes it might not be right.
Yeah. I mean, I can look back and over years when I was younger, and even to this day, I talking to people, and I remember when I was working on a local charter boat called the Marley here, and I was having some tackle failures, and John Duffy came over and he taught me how him and his mate at the time, John Prather, would set these crimpers up for every line combination, and he would have a crimp and a specific crimper that you could adjust for the line combination, so everything was perfect. And I can count the tackle failures on one hand since I've had that happen. I think it's since they taught me that. I think it's super cool when people do that.
Right back to where we started the conversation, right?
Yeah.
People in the fishing community trying to help others be successful.
Yeah. Can you tell us about how long have you always run the Big Rock? Let me back up. I don't run the Big Rock. Okay.
I'm fortunate enough to be on the Big Rock board.
Okay.
And I've been on there since 1986. I think 86 or 87.
Okay.
So we've got a board of people that give of their time freely. It's all volunteer. And, the Big Rock's grown into a fairly substantial tournament over the years. Last year we had 270 boats. This year we had 266. Last year we gave away more than $1 million to charity. This year I think we'll do the same. Our purse was up to $5.8 million this year. And while we're not rivaling Jim and the White Marlin Open yet, we're nipping at his heels.
Yeah.
We want to be just as big as the White Marlin Open is. And I love the Big Rock tournament. I love what we do here. We I don't know if you or anybody else there listens, but we live stream the VHF radio. So we've got a 600-foot tall antenna, and I sit in a room for 7 days and start off with the prayer for the fleet at 7:00, and then I can talk back and forth to the boats as they're fishing offshore. And this year we had 1.2 million people listen to that live stream from I think 52 countries in all 50 states.
Wow.
So it's sort of neat to have that opportunity to do that every week.
Were you guys the first one of, if not the first ones, you were definitely one of the first ones to do that. I mean, that thing is.
Yeah, I think the radio thing, I think we were the first people to do it, and a couple people have done it since then. And again, that's right about the same thing. When they decided they wanted to do Pirates Go, we said, here's how you do it, and here's the guy to talk to, and got them rigged up so they can do it.
Yeah,
Captain Marty there does the same thing I do to the Big Rock. Every day goes to the boats.
Yeah, Los Sueños has done a great job of doing that too.
Yep.
I mean, with the fishing down there, it's kind of probably the most interesting one to fish with, to listen to. But yeah, it's super cool, and I think anytime that we're fortunate enough to compete in a tournament where we could update, do the live thing or even the live updates, my family and friends are always super into it, which I think is cool, because I sometimes feel like nobody really cares what we do out there in the ocean, but it's cool to know that somebody back at the docks rooting for you, and they could hear how you're doing.
1.2 million people did during the Big Rock. At least that many cared, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. I mean, considering six, I don't know, in a big tournament, 5,000-6,000 competitors, people competing. Yeah, it's not a huge amount of people, but to be able to touch that many more people, I think it's really incredible, and to just kind of get what our industry is about out there, I think it's really cool.
Yeah, of course, I love to see people at the docks. How it is. You come to White Marlin Open, there's thousands of people at the dock seat. You come to Big Rock, there's a couple thousand people there to see the fish come in. I mean, it's awesome, right?
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody the other day that you didn't ask me this, but I'll tell you anyway. He's pretty good blue marlin fishing, right? Fishing right now, named Emery Ivy, and Emery fishes with us. Emery said, my grandmom took me down, and I saw a blue marlin. I touched his eyeball when I was a little bitty kid, and I said, I want to catch these.
Yeah.
So that next generation, we got to all work on that a little bit too.
I was going to ask you in the first minute, but I didn't want to cut you off. Was there a moment because I remember when I fell in love with the sport. Can you remember was there a specific moment where you'd just fallen in love with this, and you were just knew that this industry and this I guess it's a lifestyle is what you wanted to do? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I was about 12 years old when we caught the first dolphin I'd ever seen. And I was absolutely on fire from that minute on. And then the first time I caught blue marlin, that was the end of it. I mean, you know how bad that is for all of us, right?
Yeah.
You'll catch that first blue one and you'll spend your life's fortune and you'll do anything you have to catch the next one.
Yeah.
That's not a bad habit though. That's a pretty good habit to have, a lot better than some.
Yeah, I would agree. It's really incredible. I feel like you could walk around a tournament like that and like do an interview, like just interview people and be like, what everybody remembers that moment when they just kind of that this is it for them, you know, whether it's somebody who owns a boat that works really hard at something else to and is successful at something else and enjoys this, like, because it's an irrational for people who own boats. It's a super irrational thing. For people like you and I that work in the industry one way or another, we can rationalize it as, oh, well, this is how we make our living and survive, you know. Yeah. But for people who actually own the boats, it's a lot harder to justify it. I mean, they keep us going.
Don't tell them.
Yeah, I shouldn't know. That was a huge mistake. We'll have to edit that out. But yeah, I mean, you know, everybody has that moment, and I think it's really incredible.
Yeah, I do too.
Is there a boat and a day of fishing that, you know, you've had a long journey in fishing and in business, you know, it shit doesn't always go right, and I mean, being in charge of a huge company like you guys are now, growing it from a couple guys in a barn to what you are now, like, is there something you refer back to, a moment or a fishing day or something like, man, this is why I do it? I mean, I typically ask this the guys that don't run giant companies. So, well,
I'll tell you, it's a fairly simple question for me, right? I mean, I think if I look back to what makes me go to work every day, it is getting back to fishing. I mean, it's getting back to where it all started. Mm-hmm. You know, I remember the first blue marlin I was actually angling on, I caught in 1983 in a tournament. Fish ended up placing second. Where the guy that I went fishing with didn't have anybody to be the angler that morning, and he took the window air conditioner out of my house, crawled through the window, and got me up with my wife in there to get me to go fishing with him. And there was nobody on the boat but 4 friends.
Yeah.
And, you know, we just went out and fishing that day on a boat that wouldn't make about 12 knots, and caught a fish to place second. And, you know, every time you get thinking about, you know, tough days in the boat yard, or you get thinking about things in life that might not be perfect, it's pretty easy to think back on some of the days that being in this industry have given us, right? And that's just one of hundreds or maybe thousands. And I wouldn't trade for anything. I love what I do.
Yeah, that's amazing. I appreciate the time, sir. And was really an education and for me, I mean, I remember sitting on the beach with my dad, looking through the back of Marlin magazine, looking at this red Jarrett Bay. And I think it was like, I didn't know, I mean, how much money we had or we didn't have, but I was looking at this Jarrett Bay and it was red. I can't remember. It was probably the late 90s. And I remember, Dad, this is only $289,000 or something like that. And I was like, we got to get this one. Like, I didn't know, but I remember, you know, looking back on those boats, being a kid that's been I've always been into boats, but I didn't get into fishing, like super into fishing until I was like 17 or 18. But I'd always looked at your boats in the back of Marlin magazine thinking, I mean, man, it would be really cool to go fishing on one of those one day, and to be able to speak with you this evening was just a blast. So I appreciate it.
I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed talking to you. By the way, it was a 53-footer, and the boat was built as tight lines.
Yeah.
You're thinking about. Yeah. And it was a really cool boat. Well, anyway, not compared to today, it's pretty plain.
No, well, tell us about it. I mean, yeah,
it just had, it was a couple of 6-cylinder Caterpillars at 800 horsepower and sort of charter boat interior. It wasn't real fancy, and the evolution is come along. Now it's
that must have been a rocket ship back then.
She did pretty good, yeah. Yes, she did. A guy named Pete Ray ran it, and Pete's still around now. He's on right now, and Pete.
I met him a couple times.
We used to say could tear up an animal. So if he could tear up an animal, we were kind of worried about the boat, but she managed to survive.
Yeah. Is it still around today? Do you know where it's at?
Boat's around. Yeah, the boat's around. Knock on wood, all our boats are still around. The second boat we built sitting on the ground in Ocean City.
I see it every day. It's a
I keep on
shame.
hoping that somebody somehow is going to rescue that thing.
Yeah.
But I understand that's tied up with some legal stuff, and that's really none of my business. So I'll stay away from that.
Yeah,
But I do
that's
hope she gets rescued because she's the only one that's in danger.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty crazy that you have them, that some of them end up after going a lot of places, end up there in Morehead City and in that area.
They do, but then then they turn around and ease off.
Mhm.
We just sent one to Bermuda, just living over there full time now.
Yeah. I saw.
So-
Which one did I see when I was in the Dominican this year? The Puerto Rican Seawees? No, it's not Seawees.
Seawish.
Yeah, Seawish. Yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Q, that's a cool boat. They were a great customer, a lot of fun to work with. I think they're in St. Thomas right now.
Yeah. Well, cool.
I try to keep up where my children are.
It's hard. As many as you
really
have.
is hard. It really is. And as they separate, I shouldn't say separate, but as they change owners and change owners, I don't think people understand that we're trying to keep up with them pretty hard.
Yeah.
Now, I wish I'd picked the phone and said, "Hey, I just bought hull number X."
It should be like should be almost a requirement for you. If you buy a custom boat, you should have to get in contact with the builder.
I'm gonna put you in charge of it.
I'd be happy to do it.
Well, look, man, we're gonna be in Ocean City next week.
Yes,
you know
sir.
where we tie up, right? I mean, it's always in front of the restaurant.
Yeah.
We're always in front of the restaurant. Come down and hang out, have
Cool.
a beer with us. We'll tell some fishing stories, or can't think of something about fishing. I'll tell you about the time we knocked the first boat in the floor by accident.
Sounds good.
There's always a story somewhere.
Well, I appreciate the time, Randy. It was a
I
pleasure.
really enjoyed it. It's been
So
great.
cool.
I really enjoyed talking to you.
We'll have to do it again. Thank you.
Anytime you let me know, buddy.